Hello, my friends. I am so glad you are here today. Take a slow breath and let yourself settle into your chair. Make yourself comfortable, because the story I want to share with you is one that will stay with you long after you finish listening. There is something in this journey that speaks directly to the quiet struggle inside you, the one that nobody else sees, the one where you keep trying even when the words do not come easily. You are not alone in that struggle, and today I want to show you why. Picture, if you will, a man standing alone on a stage in Stockholm, Sweden. The air is cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible, and your fingers stiff inside your gloves. He is 53 years old, and there are nearly 2,000 people watching him. The orchestra is playing, the lights are bright, and a king is about to place a gold medal around his neck. This medal represents the greatest honor in all of science, a prize that only a handful of people in history have ever received. But this man is different from the others who have stood in this same spot. Can you imagine what it feels like to be completely alone in a room full of powerful people? Can you imagine what it means to stand for something that nobody else understands yet? This man received this medal not once, but twice. Think about that for a moment. 2 Nobel Prizes, 1 man, the only person in the entire history of these awards to win 2 prizes entirely by himself, without sharing them with anyone else. This is the story of Linus Pauling, and it is far stranger and more beautiful than you might imagine. Linus Pauling was born on February 28, 1901, in a small house in Portland, Oregon. Portland was a quiet city in those days, a place where horses pulled wagons through streets of mud, and the smell of timber and river water filled the air. His father was a pharmacist, which means he was a person who prepared medicines and remedies for the people in their community. His mother was a teacher, a woman who spent her days helping children learn to read and write. They lived in a modest home, the kind that smelled of dried herbs and old books. Young Linus, as a boy of only 3 years old, would sit in the kitchen watching his mother cook and his father mix potions in little glass bottles. He was a curious child, always asking questions, always wanting to know why the sky was blue, and why water made things clean, and why his own reflection looked back at him from dark windows. But the world had other plans for this little boy. When Linus was just 9 years old, his father became sick. The sickness came slowly, like a shadow creeping across a wall. First, his father could not work as long hours. Then he could not work at all. The family had very little money, and the sound of his mother crying in the other room at night became something Linus knew too well. In 1910, when Linus was only 9, his father died. He was gone, and a piece of the world fell away with him. The boy who had watched his father mix medicines in glass bottles would never see him again. Think about that. A 9-year-old boy standing at a grave in the rain, trying to understand why someone he loved could just disappear from the world. His mother was left alone with 3 children and almost no money. The house they lived in grew cold in winter, and sometimes there was not enough food on the table. Can you imagine living through that? Linus kept going. He did not have a choice. His mother took in washing from wealthy families to earn a few dollars, and the boy helped wherever he could. He delivered newspapers before sunrise and worked in a machine shop after school. But here is what saved him, what lifted him out of the darkness and into something extraordinary. His mother kept the house full of books. Every night, by the light of a small lamp, she read to her children. She read them stories of great men and women, stories of discovery and courage, stories of people who had started with nothing and built something that mattered. These stories planted something inside young Linus, A seed that would grow into an unbreakable belief that he could do anything if he just worked hard enough and never gave up. And then something extraordinary occurred. When he was 15, a traveling salesman came to town and showed him a small chemistry set, a box filled with tiny bottles and instructions for making things fizz and change color. Linus looked at that box and saw something that took his breath away. He saw the entire universe contained in a small wooden case. He begged his mother to buy it, and somehow she found the money. That chemistry set became his whole world. But nothing worth having comes easily. When Linus finished high school, the world told him he could not go to college. His family had no money, and college was for rich people, not for boys from poor homes in Oregon. But Linus had learned something from watching his mother work until her hands cracked and bleed. He had learned that obstacles are not walls. They are doorways that require more effort to open. He worked for 2 years, every single day, saving every single dollar. He worked in a grain elevator, where the dust made it hard to breathe, and he worked as a railway laborer, where his back ached from lifting heavy things. And then in 1922, at the age of 21, he walked onto the campus of Oregon Agricultural College, now known as Oregon State University. He was finally there. He was finally learning what he had dreamed about. Since that day, his father mixed medicines in little glass bottles. He studied chemistry like it was oxygen, like without it he would die. He read every book, ran every experiment, asked every question. He graduated at the top of his class in just 3 years, not 4. And then he kept going, all the way to a PhD, the highest degree a person can earn. Now imagine standing in a laboratory in 1927, staring at something that nobody in the history of human beings has ever seen before. Linus was in Germany, the greatest center of science in the world at that time, and he was looking at the structure of atoms, the tiny invisible building blocks that make up everything you see around you, from this microphone to the walls of this room to your own body. He was peering into the smallest and most fundamental layer of reality, and what he found there changed everything. He discovered how atoms connect to each other, how they form molecules, how they build the physical world. He called this understanding the nature of the chemical bond, and it was so important, so revolutionary, that when he published his findings in 1939, it became known as the Bible of modern chemistry. Scientists from every country bought the book and studied it like a holy text. He was only 38 years old, but the world was not finished with him. In 1954, standing in that cold auditorium in Stockholm, Linus Pauling received his first Nobel Prize. The gold medal hung around his neck, and the king shook his hand, and for a moment everything he had suffered, every hungry winter, every sleepless night of study, every moment of doubt, all of it meant something. He had proven that the boy from Portland with no money and no connections could stand at the very top of human knowledge. And then, can you imagine this? 8 years later in 1962, he won a second Nobel Prize, this time for peace. Not for chemistry, not for physics, but for his work against nuclear weapons, for his desperate fight to stop the spread of bombs that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. Think about what that means. He was a scientist who used his voice and his courage to stand against the most powerful governments on Earth. He wrote letters, gave speeches, organized petitions. He told the world that nuclear weapons were wrong, that using them was murder, that building them was madness. And the world, which had ignored him at first, eventually listened. The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed in 1963, just 1 year after he won that second prize. Remember this detail, it will return later. When Linus won his second Nobel Prize, he was 61 years old, and his body was beginning to betray him in ways he did not yet understand. The same fierce energy that had driven him through decades of impossible work was also slowly consuming him from the inside. This is where the story takes a turn that nobody expects, a turn that makes this journey both inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. You see, Linus Pauling had one more obsession after his scientific achievements, one more battle that would define his final years. He became absolutely convinced, with all the intensity of his character, that massive doses of vitamin C could prevent colds, cure cancer, and extend human life. He took enormous amounts of it every single day, thousands of milligrams when the recommended daily amount was just 60. He wrote books about it, gave interviews about it, promoted it with the same passion he had once used to explain chemical bonds. And the scientific community, which had once celebrated him as the greatest chemist alive, began to push back. They said his claims were not supported by evidence. They said he was harming his reputation. They said he was embarrassing himself. Some called him a fraud, though that word is too harsh and too simple for what was really happening. He was a brilliant man who had given everything to science and was now giving everything to one final idea that the world would not accept. In 1994, Linus Pauling died of cancer at the age of 93. He died in his home in the mountains near Big Sur, California, with his wife Ava Helen beside him. She had been his partner for more than 60 years, a woman who had shared his triumphs and his struggles, and his final obsession with vitamin C. And here is what is most remarkable about this story, what makes it matter to you right now as you listen. He won those 2 Nobel Prizes not because the world loved him, but because he refused to stop. When people said he was too poor for college, he worked until he could pay his own way. When people said his ideas were impossible, he proved them wrong in the laboratory. When people said a scientist should not speak about politics and peace, he used his voice anyway. Every single time the world tried to push him down, he got back up. Every single time they told him he was not good enough, he worked harder. And every word you learn in English, every sentence you struggle to understand, every moment you feel like giving up, you are doing exactly what he did. You are refusing to accept that you cannot do something. You are building something inside yourself that nobody can see yet, but that will one day be undeniable. Maybe sometimes the words do not come easily. Maybe there are days when you feel like no matter how much you study, you are still far from where you want to be. But think about this. Linus Pauling started as a boy in a cold house where the water froze overnight. He started with no money, no connections, no advantages, and he changed the entire world. Not once, but twice. You have the same fire inside you that he had. You have the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Every new word you learn is like a brick in a building that nobody else can see yet. Every sentence you understand, every conversation you manage, every book you finish reading, these are all acts of extraordinary courage that the world will never fully recognize. But you will know. And one day, if you keep going, you will stand in your own auditorium in Stockholm, metaphorically speaking, and you will feel that gold medal around your neck. Not because the world gave it to you, but because you earned it by refusing to stop. So here is my question for you, before we say goodbye. When you think about Linus Pauling, what surprises you most? Was it the poverty of his childhood, the brilliance of his discoveries, the courage it took to fight against nuclear weapons, or perhaps the way he kept going even when his own community turned against him? What part of his journey spoke to something inside you? I want you to share that with me in the comments below. There are many more journeys waiting here. Many more stories of people who started with nothing and built something extraordinary. Keep listening, keep learning, keep going. Your story is still being written, and I cannot wait to see what you become. This is Storytime English, and I will see you in the next one.